We just saw the first assassination attempt on a former president. This is the first time this has happened since 1981, when sitting president Ronald Reagan had an assassination attempt on his life. This is what happens when you have narratives. Narratives have consequences. And that's the part that I'm really worried is going to get lost in all of this, that people are going to forget that the way that we choose to verbalize the things that are happening, or the way that we connect the dots of the things that are happening, are going to make their way out into culture. And the phrase that you've heard a lot, and that you're certainly going to hear me say a lot because it organizes my thinking: politics is downstream of culture. There is a thing happening in culture. There is a wave that is propagating through the people that make up this country, and understanding how the narratives that all of us are putting out into the world will ripple through the humans makes it understandable that the way that something is framed has a massive impact on the actions that are taken. And so what we're seeing now, whether you love Trump or you hate Trump, we see the somewhat natural conclusion of saying we have a guy that is literally Hitler. We have to stop him no matter what it takes. You hear people using words like he has to be eliminated. And I have no doubt if you play that full clip in its context, I'm sure he says as a candidate or whatever. But when you use this kind of ratcheted up language, you are going to get these knock-on effects. And this is where I think people are not being honest about what's happening right now, which is the second and third order consequences. So the second and third order consequences of the way that Trump talks is very problematic in terms of it engenders a response from his audience. It engenders a response from the left. The second and third order consequences of the way that the left is framing Trump as literally being like Hitler, all of these things end up creating a framing for what's going on, not as something that is political, but something that is existential. And when you make this debate about being existential, now all of a sudden, not only the natural response, the logical response is to escalate to this level. It is a logical response. In fact, if you actually were able to be a precog, like in the movie Minority Report, if you were able to do that and you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he really was going to cause the kind of loss of life that Hitler caused, you would have a moral obligation, at least with my value set, to take him out. But what's getting lost is nobody's a precog. Nobody can see. We don't know what was going to happen. And so to take this from the realm of there are ideas, and these ideas need to be debated because Trump is a representation of the way that half of the country feels. And the fact that people are losing sight that Trump is not the one creating all of this. Trump is simply giving form in language, in embodiment, to a feeling that people have. You can think of the populace in many ways as the subconscious of the nation. Now, the subconscious of the nation ultimately needs to bring its emotive feelings into the conscious mind. And the way that you do that is with a leader that can articulate the things that you were feeling, which is why you see people saying, yes, exactly. He's saying exactly what I've been feeling. You get that on the right, you get that on the left, you get that everywhere. Whenever you have this large collection of people, they are going to be feeling a thing. It is going to be somewhat ineffable until a good, usually very profound orator comes along and they actually put words to what you're saying. Now, the words that get put to what's happening are going to matter a lot because they have huge implications in terms of the way that the second and third order consequences are going to play out. And so when you look at this and realize that we actually had somebody running for president have an attempted assassination on his life, the evidence speaks for itself in terms of what the outcome of that would be. And when you can look back and look at yes, if I believe that I can see the future with 100% clarity and he is going to do things like Hitler, and you get everybody saying this person is Hitlerian and absolutely must be stopped. When you get people using the Wall Street Journal had on their cover yesterday, the day of the attempt, Biden trains fire on Trump. And then literally that day, there is an assassination attempt. Okay, all I want people to understand at this point, because I'm not here to chastise people, I just want people to understand that narratives have consequences. I'm not calling for censorship. People should be able to say what they think, and people should be able to make the point. If they believe that this is exactly what you have to do with Trump, then I want them to say that. Now, if they're calling for violence, if they're trying to incite violence, if they are trying to convince people to actually go out and do this, that we have to stop. But like even looking at some of the things that Destiny, the omni-liberal, is saying, yo, I think that it is an absolutely horrific argument to put forward that I don't want to misquote him if we can pull that up. While he pulls it up, in fact, because this is about empathy, the one thing I don't want getting lost in all of this is that there was somebody killed at the rally, that there was another person that is, at least at last check, was in critical condition. The consequences are very real. These are real people. They have families, people that they love. And when all of this gets swept up in a narrative of politics, of, hey, my side is right, and no matter what happens, we have to make this happen. We have to get our opponents out, and we have to get the person that we want in no matter what. People become tools, they become pawns, and we lose sight of the humanity of all of this. So the only thing any of us can do is look at the dots of what's really happening, call the dots the real events, and then say what we think it means. And so there's no doubt that's exactly what I'm doing right now. But the thing that I want people to put back into this is, one, an understanding that these are real people that are involved in all of this, including people that feel dispossessed, including people that are so afraid of our future that they want to see this happen to Trump, but being very careful that you do your best to think through what the second and third order consequences are going to be of this. So for instance, let's take the second and third order consequences. If that bullet had been on point and had actually killed Donald Trump, I cannot predict what would have happened. You're hearing people say that there would have been a civil war. I doubt that civil war would have kicked off instantly. That doesn't seem probable, but that could be hopium. What would have happened is exactly what happened after the death of George Floyd, which is I suddenly felt like I was in a car that had hit a patch of ice. And I didn't know what I was going to hit. I just knew I was no longer in control. And if I could get people to understand that is how societies have these stochastic, punctuated moments of violence, disruption. You don't have to lose your whole nation. We look back on history like the late 60s, starting really in 63 when JFK is assassinated, but going through, I think, through 68 for sure. We just had this rash of assassinations where people no longer felt like they no longer felt like it was even sensical to try to play the game at the level of debating ideas. And that happens because of the narrative that we begin telling about what's happening. And so I want, certainly myself and everybody else, to focus on, okay, what are the second and third order consequences of the narrative that we're telling about this? That doesn't mean you intentionally lie. And at some point, you and I are going to have to get into narratives and why it isn't just bullshit and why life is stories. There is no way around this. We are all trapped in narratives at all times. And so, as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. And in that gap, you do a thing. And the thing you do is create a narrative. You find meaning and purpose. You say what all of this means. And if you choose a positive meaning for what you're going through, then you can survive anything. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust. If you choose a negative meaning, then an entire other set of actions will cascade. So what you believe about yourself, your life, the world, all of those things will manifest in your behavior. And we've just seen unhinged rhetoric now for so long, and very few people are trying to find a narrative that is both true and moving us towards where I hope we all want to go. And you guys will hear me say this over and over and over. You have to know what your goal is. If you know what your goal is, then cool. Like if your goal is to get Trump assassinated, hey, amazing rhetoric. It almost worked. If your goal is to have Americans have a shared sense of national identity and pride and to want to help each other and to be a useful and moral force in the world, we are fucking up. Look at the outcome of your system, of your plan, of your mode of action. The outcome is telling you whether you're moving closer to or farther away from your goal. For me, we are moving about as rapidly away from anything that I think is a sensible goal as you can move. Okay, omniliberal. Here's the tweet. Donald Trump indicated, and sorry, can you zoom in a little? I wish my eyesight were that good, Eric. Okay, Donald Trump incited an insurrection and then was granted full criminal immunity for possibly all of his involvement. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him. I will argue this position against any and all conservatives of reasonable size, but there's a reason none of you spineless hacks step outside of your echo chambers. I've had Destiny on the show. I think Destiny is extremely smart. I think Destiny is very good at holding a lot of information in his head and breaking things apart. But when you are saying that I'll debate that, presumably he's saying one ought to have no empathy for people. It was empathy, right? Not sympathy? Yeah. No, sympathy. I have zero sympathy. Excuse me. I want to make sure that I'm very clear. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him. Okay. If you're putting forth a moral argument that somebody ought not have sympathy, I don't see any way to put together a logical argument for that, but you could certainly build a moral case. And if he's building a moral case that people should not have sympathy for somebody that, I'm going to take his stance. It's not me saying this, but Destiny, my interpretation of him, is that he believes that Trump really did try to make himself king. I've heard him use that rhetoric elsewhere. Really tried to make himself king, would do it again. And so he thinks that is so bad and so not the outcome that we should want, that he has no sympathy for let's just really take the hard case, for the person behind him that got shot to death just for attending a rally.
I mean, honestly, it seems like he's saying because he tried to be a dictator, it's now okay to take him out. And I understand that you might feel politically that this is wrong.
I'm not going to say that that's where he went. And I think we have to be really, really careful. What he is saying is he will debate anyone of size that you shouldn't have sympathy for Donald Trump or anybody that supports him. So I want to be very clear. That's as far as he's going with his argument. And my whole thing is, in some ways, I'm more concerned about that because as we construct a narrative, so here's how a narrative works. I think we have to cover this. You look at a thing. Okay, you don't have to argue about what thing you're looking at. Donald Trump, somebody just tried to kill him. Okay, we all saw that. Now the question is, what does it mean? And this is where you're going to see the narratives begin to diverge wildly between the right and the left. And the left is going to say that he brought this on himself. Donald Trump has brought this on himself. And these are the natural outcomes of inciting January 6th. This is a natural
using
outcome
decisive
of
language,
calling people filthy and vermin and all the things that he said. He brought it on himself, and this 20-year-old kid was a registered Republican. They're not going to mention that he also donated to Democratic causes or the fact that he's 20 years old and may have at one point registered as a Republican simply because that's what his parents did. I know nothing about this man. I'm just saying it won't matter because people will look at the same thing and they will walk away with different narratives. The right is going to focus you entirely on Trump is a hero. He can't be taken down no matter how many times they try to stop him. He just
Can we pull up
rises
that Elon Musk tweet? I feel like this picture has like encompassed the weekend.
Yeah, with him with fists raised and the American flag behind him. I mean, this is absolutely incredible iconography. Yeah. Incredible iconography. And I think you did as well, but I got texts from people that said, I just assumed that Trump orchestrated this himself. And look, conspiracies, sadly, at times reveal themselves to be true. I know nothing about this. But for that to be your first assumption tells you two things. One, they have a narrative running in their brain, and that interpretation fits the narrative that they already have constructed. And that is why narratives are important, because you connect these dots. And again, the dots are the things you see. The narrative is what you see means. the narrative is what you see means. And so when people see this, if they believe already, they already have a narrative running in their mind that this guy is the next Hitler, he is terrible, he's going to ruin democracy, he's an existential threat either to democracy or to the nation, I've heard both. All of a sudden, it's like, well, yeah, if this ends up being good for him, then he probably did it. And by the way, why wouldn't he? Yeah. Like, why wouldn't he do this? So where the thing I'm waiting for, I think, will remain a little bit closer to sanity if nobody ever questions the ear. Because if people are really going to say that he hired a sharpshooter to graze his ear with a bullet from
400 yards away.
Yeah, like that's absurd. That's patently absurd. Mm-hmm. Because the risk of him getting killed is just so high. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. If they start saying, well, maybe he, when he touched his own ear, he had something in his hand and he caused the wound or if that fracture happens, then I get really nervous. Yeah. Because now we're trying to say, which unfortunately we saw a lot with Biden's decline, you didn't see what you thought you saw. So anyway, we could go down a rabbit hole there. Right now, I just want everyone to stay focused on the narrative matters a lot. Mm-hmm. And because we've been telling this narrative in the media about how bad Trump is and that he has to be stopped effectively by any means, this is the logical outcome of that.
What should we actually be talking about? I don't want people to run into their left and right pockets and spin for the next 36 hours to make it work for them. What should we actually be thinking about? What should we actually take away from this moment?
Play out where this all goes, right? So you're going to be hearing a lot about they tried to first silence Donald Trump by censoring his speech, take his getting booted off of Twitter. They tried to impeach him. That also didn't work. They tried lawfare. That didn't work. And now they've tried an assassination attempt. Okay, that's a progression. And there's plenty of pundits that were like, hey, guess where this goes? Tucker Carlson, probably the most famous, and just said, there's nothing left. The only thing left is assassination. Now, what gets terrifying is when you can really observe that. Now, hearing that before it happened yesterday, I would have said, okay, that's probably a bit much, especially given the level of security and stuff that these things have. But I get where you're going, but you're exaggerating for audience. You're chumming the waters. You're throwing them the things they want to hear. But it really is a pretty simple logical progression. And so now part of my worldview just broke. And whenever I'm unable to predict the outcome of something, I realize I have to update my worldview. Now, my worldview said that there were brackets on this. I have long believed for financial reasons that civil war was getting more and more likely, but I always thought it was going to come from a financial place, that we would go into a recession, that things would be just bad financially, and then this would pop off as a result of that. That is like so predictable, it's ridiculous. So now to see, it didn't even take that. Now, we're not in the greatest economic situation right now, but I wouldn't have predicted what just happened based on that. But you can predict it if you're just focused on the narrative, which is why somebody like Tucker was able to say, well, here's the narrative running in my mind. Here's the narrative running in a lot of conservative minds. Mm-hmm. This is just a sequencing of people who believe that he's the worst thing ever, are moving up a scale of how hard they're going to go to stop him until you get to the point where it's an attempted assassination. So because you can follow that logic, this is what I want people to run with. Okay, what's the narrative that you're holding in your mind? You have to begin to tease out. Narrative isn't truth. The dots aren't even necessarily truth. In fact, pull up the CNN headline. This everybody already knows the media manipulates us. So that is not a surprise. Being aware of the fact that it happens, very useful. I think it is really important that people watch both sides of the coverage on this. Most people are going to hate one side or the other. That's fine, but you just need to understand where the manipulations lie so that you can ultimately form your own opinion. I think that's really important. And even somebody that you may despise, they usually get big because they're able to put their finger on an emotion that a lot of people are feeling. Again, Donald Trump is a representation in both senses of the word. He represents how roughly half the country feels about the system, the deep state, the government, whatever word we want to use, is somehow fucking them up, tripping them up, taking their money, holding them back, whatever. And then he's literally a representative in that he is running for president again. Mm-hmm. Now, when you understand that, then it's like, okay, these things that are being felt by a lot of people. Okay, so the tweet that I wanted to pull up, which we are pulling up right now, is from CNN. Anyway, they have a headline. The headline says something to the, in fact, I think I have it right here. Something to the effect of Trump fell.
Secret Service swoops Trump or something like that. Yeah.
So Trump falls hard after hearing loud noise. Right. And then somebody memed it and was like, oh, if CNN had been around back in 1963 when JFK was shot, it would have read, JFK falls really, really hard at rally. It's like that is looking at the same thing, right? A shooter shoots into a crowd, grazes Trump's ear, kills somebody in the crowd, and the headline is Trump falls after hearing loud noise. Now, one, if I'm CNN, I defend that by saying, hey, it was too early. We didn't know what was happening. Fair, but you reveal yourself in your default assumption, right? Mm-hmm. So just really paying attention to that, because once we start getting into the realm of, oh, hey, everybody, this is what you saw. And then this is the narrative that we're going to tie in terms of what all of this means. If you have fracture points on both sides, it just gets more deranging. Yeah. And we clearly do. So if everybody stops, focuses on, we need a narrative that's going to yield the outcome that we want. So first ask, what is the outcome that you want? If the outcome that you want is the erasure of the 50% of the people that you don't agree with, well, then that leads to violence. It doesn't lead anywhere else. I mean, it doesn't lead anywhere else. Yeah. So that goes to violence, because nobody is going to be forced into believing something. Even if you create a totalitarian state and force them to verbally acknowledge that they agree with you, they won't agree with you in their hearts, and they will look for every opportunity to subvert you, to bring you down. Yeah. So that path only leads to violence. And so the narrative that I have running in my head is, when you start messing around with the layer of government that holds the country together, even when that layer is bad, it is almost always replaced with instability. And then it just becomes a huge question mark as to what arises from that instability. So you have to find a narrative. And one thing that bums me out is that in all of this, of course, RFK's message of unity is just no one will even be able to hear it. Yeah. It's gone. As far as I can tell, as much as this seems like it cements Trump's presidency, it also seems to cement that people just aren't going to be listening to RFK. So if your narrative predicts violence, if the just stair step into it is violence, then we have to ask, is that what we want? And if that's what people want, then we're headed towards national divorce. I won't say we're headed towards civil war, only because I don't want that to be true. I want there to be other places that we can exit, but I don't want that to be true either. National divorce to me is just a tragedy. That would be an absolute tragedy, because it's all fucking narrative, man. Yeah. It's all narrative. It's all social media. This is just, when you step back and look at what's happening right now as waves propagating through a system. I know you guys are going to tell me not to speak like this, but this really is what's happening. Is all of us as humans, once we're a part of a collective, what any one of us does is sort of just either amplify or de-amplify and a message. And so based on that, when a lot of people amplify one message, then you see it just sweep through. When people don't react, then the message dies very quickly. I mean, everybody understands when something goes viral. And so now what we're seeing are these waves that just smash against one side, which then creates this equal and opposite reaction that smashes against the other side. And so now the only way, I mean, this isn't hey, everybody, love your neighbor. Think of it as a physical system. The only way to stop this is to have, if all of us simply amplify or de-amplify or simply fail to react, then that's all that's left. You have one of those three options. You either amplify, de-amplify, or don't react. And Know what the outcome is that you want and figure out which one of those three things that you need to do, which is why I'm obsessed with, I don't want to be down in the politics of this. This isn't about politics. This is about culture. Culture is about waves propagating through a human system. Yeah. Ideas moving through the minds of people, right? And so 1 minute it could be all about Kendrick Lamar's new song and the beef between him and Drake. And that's the wave that you can just see burning through culture. And the next minute it's this. But that energy is so palpable. Hopefully people will not get lost in fancy words. It's just ideas move through people in like this excitement way. Yeah. And when people are excited about an idea and they have the narrative that allows it to be mimetic and to spread like fucking crazy, now all of a sudden you have to go, okay, cool. I can only do one of three things: amplify, de-amplify, not react. Which path leads to the outcome that I want? And nobody's there. All the rhetoric you're gonna hear is gonna be about like what I call the T. It's gonna be about, did the Secret Service do their job? Should people be calling him Hitler? It's like, no. What are the narratives that are being talked about? What do they mean? Should we be a divided country? Should we be coming together? Should ideas be debated instead of this being everything is beyond the Overton window, he should not be allowed to talk? Everybody, in fact, a lot of what I believe right now is based on a base assumption that I hold, which is that everybody thinks they can see the future. Everybody thinks they know who Trump is and what he's going to do. And they have so much conviction, at least one person, potentially mentally ill. I'm making that up. I have not heard that. I don't think anybody knows. This is Tom Bilyeu's prognostication. Potentially mentally ill, but at least one person was like, yeah, I can see so clearly the future. You got to kill him. So anyway, where do you want to end up? What does your belief system, your narrative predict will happen?
Do you think that the intention of this is kind of to cut the head off the snake? Because I agree with you. There's 50% of the country that feel this way. So taking out Trump doesn't take out that idea, but maybe the assumption is that without that leader, it will just kind of disband and maybe people come to the other side? Or do you think once Trump is out, he's now officially a martyr and it just kind of, the idea gets bigger and it grows and it
There's
becomes
two questions in there. Yeah. Question one is, what were they thinking in attempting to kill Trump? And hopefully at some point we will find something that gives us clarity on that. So now I am just guessing based on there being a more or less limited set of obvious options. So it's entirely possible that this is a schizophrenic and Trump just happened to be a famous person to him and God told him what, you never know. The most likely is that they fail to understand that Trump is a representation of the feelings of roughly half of this country who do not believe that their future will be better for them than it was for their parents, and it won't be better for their children than it is for them. Anytime you're in that sequence, you're going to have a problem. And because they fail to understand that, they think, cut the head off the snake and all will be well, which I don't know how many government regimes, even the US, has toppled where it hasn't played out like that. The people have to see before they go, oh, this is probably a terrible fucking strategy. But nonetheless, they think that. The other option is they're just not thinking through the second and third order consequences of, if I had actually been able to kill him, and let's say it did work, all that energy is now dissipated because there is no leader to give voice. And that really does matter. When there's no leader, like, that energy just never gets crystallized into a meme, which can then be spread. You really need that for that idea to move through culture with that veracity where you see it just crashing from side to side. Okay, so there is a certain amount of truth to the fact that if you can take out the leader, you create this power vacuum. The power vacuum is largely just people wanted to follow that person. So they were a uniting factor. They were able to galvanize a set of ideas. And they're probably able to give that idea mimetic value so that it would transfer around between people very quickly. Okay, but if you had killed Trump, I think what you see the next day, as I was talking about earlier, is you'll see pockets of violence like we did after George Floyd, where people who feel completely disenfranchised, who are like, okay, and now you literally killed my hope of finally being heard. They have felt that Trump has been unjustly persecuted for, whatever the last 6-8 years. I mean, they were going after him in office, out of office, like it was nonstop violence. And when you think of him as a representation, suddenly that's like an attack on, if I'm that person, I'm like, yo, you're attacking me now because that guy was just my representative. And so it's going to pop, man. It's going to pop off. And so the question becomes, how far would that have gone? That I don't know. Obviously, my hope is that that would have petered out very quickly. But that in taking that shot, if it had been successful, I think things would have been way worse for somebody who doesn't like Trump. Whether you're in the Republican Party and you hate Trump, whether you're in the Democratic Party and you hate Trump, killing him is about the worst thing you're going to do because you are going to ignite people that feel ignored.
All right, lightning round. Let's jump right into it. Is the media somewhat responsible for this?
All of us have three options, whether we're a media company or an individual: amplify, de-amplify, not react. So they have amplified like crazy at every opportunity because it's what gets clicks. That is the truth.
On Tuesday, is Trump up in the polls or down in the polls?
Oh, Jesus, I can't imagine he's not up.
Should Biden be worried about his presidential campaign at this point?
Obviously.
Do you think this happens again?
That one's way harder to answer because it really comes down to, do we have a problem of staffing in the Secret Service or just running the Secret Service well? Because if what we just saw, obviously I look at everything through an entrepreneur's lens. If I look at the Secret Service as a company, a startup, or even worse, a mature company that has rot on the inside, and their hiring practices are off or their training isn't great, and that's what led to there being a shooter that close, that from eyewitness reports that I've seen, they were saying, we were trying to flag the police and say, there is a guy on that roof crawling with a gun. In their words, they were being ignored. They probably just weren't being understood because it seemed like they were trying to shout across a distance or flag them down across. It wasn't like, hey, officer, there's a guy right here. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about, silly man? I doubt it was that. It's going to be something more like they're trying to flag him down. Hey, there's a guy up there. And they don't quite understand what he's saying. So anyway, if we find that this is a company that has some sort of highly dysfunctional rot, then they're not suddenly on a dime going to turn around and be good at their job. The thing that scares me far more than this, in fact, there is a congressman who I think I can put my hand on their name.
Doing that tweet.
Not fast. But there is a congressman that put a bill into Congress like a month ago. I mean, it's pretty recent, trying to remove Secret Service protection from disgraced former presidents. It's called the Disgraced Something Act. And the goal was that if he got convicted, that they would be able to deny him Secret Service protection. Now, I will assume they were doing it as an intimidation tactic versus actually hoping that somebody would shoot him. I don't know. Obviously, I can't speak to that. But again, that first leap that you make, usually best to temper it, but you certainly reveal your base assumptions. So that is a really bad look right now. And so that would be my bigger concern, is that you're certainly going to see a narrative form it'll be very interesting to see how Trump responds. His first reaction was very pro the people that protected him. If he sticks with that and is like, I won't hear a negative word, these people are absolute heroes who put their lives at risk to protect me, come on, we have to be unified, amazing. If he hears the rhetoric of, these guys, this incompetence is intentional and they've done this to put him in jeopardy. And then Trump is like, yeah, this is crazy. Because I know Elon was tweeting saying that the Secret Service has to resign the top. Now, if that is just all about, hey, this is about unintentional incompetence, fine. If this becomes about intentional incompetence trying to take Trump out, again, follow that narrative. Where does it go? You can't trust anybody. Biden's trying to take him out. Biden might not have been directly behind it, but he's like nefariously pulling these strings. That's where, again, you just see this increase in velocity of the divide. That's the part that worries me. All right, everybody. At the end of the day, all of us are going to have to make a decision whether we are going to amplify, de-amplify, or just not react. as one person who clearly has a bias. My bias I will wear nakedly on my sleeve. It is finding a way to tell a story that brings us together. Read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. My interpretation of that, it's been years since I read it, but people used to go to him in prison and say, we need to be violent. It's long enough that we have resisted nonviolently. And if my memory serves, he said something, this is not a quote, this is a paraphrase, but I keep violence as an option on the list of things to do. But it is an option of such last resort because of the horrifying second and third order consequences. It is far better to do this in a way that unifies. And what he did when he got out, at least from my distant viewpoint, is so inspiring, of bringing people together. And because I know that humans respond so powerfully to narrative, I really want to see people amplifying a narrative that finds a path for us all to come together. And so here is one from an impromptu standpoint, that enough is enough. Cool. Look at where this led. And regardless of who the shooter was, because I now see a data point for where the division leads us, and I don't like that data point, it's not leading me to the future that I want, I'm going to lean on, and this is why I will single out destiny for a minute. I'm going to find sympathy for all of Trump supporters. I'm going to find empathy for the other side. I am going to think only about the things that unite us and not the things that divide us. And when you do that, you will find that there is way more that we have in common and that there is a ton of true stuff. You don't have to make these things up. There's a ton of true stuff that actually does unite us. There is a reason why in your day-to-day life, you don't encounter a bunch of sociopaths popping off of the mouth with their political opinions, because they're just trying to feed their kids. They're just trying to get along, trying to have fun. They want to laugh with you. They want to enjoy. And this is in large part because of the way that social media just allows these ideas to get crystallized into their most divisive, name-calling, horrifying rhetoric. It rewards impulsive behavior. It is crazy town. If we can propagate things that bring us together, we will move towards the vision of the future any way that I want to see. You have to decide what it is the future is you want to see. Make sure that you amplify those messages. Don't just think about the here and now. Think about second, third order consequences, which can be very hard to predict. So be very careful. All right, everybody. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, be legendary. Take care.